There you go. Yeah, I heard something. Not right now, but like I think when you touched it, like it maybe it started working for a split second. No, I can't hear you. I'll let you know when I can hear you. All right, well, you can hear me. You're early. Usually I don't get on this early, but are you a first timer here? Maybe just give me a thumbs up.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect. Not sure what
My
you did there.
my headphones, I don't know. Sometimes they work great, sometimes they don't.
It's working now, it seems. Welcome. Is this your first time joining us?
Yeah,
Okay, awesome. Welcome, welcome.
thank you.
Hello, Swapnil. Hello. Thanks for joining and joining early. Usually not this early, but anyway, here we are. Usually we have anywhere from I don't know, 15 folks. I've had as many as like 40 folks on in a given session. But anyway, we'll kick this off here in a minute. I have a bunch of I have a question board where you can drop some questions in, and then we'll get started here after a few folks trickle in. Hi, Danita, George, Stephanie. A lot of new
Hello.
names here. Welcome, Victor.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks for joining us. If you guys open up the little chat there, there's a link to an online question board where you could drop some questions in or upvote any of the questions there that resonate with you. I'll give a super brief intro. I think a lot of you are coming from the Never Search Alone community. I've been part of the community for 9 months, almost a year. I moderated two JSCs. They've since all moved on and have found their next positions. Um, I was a job seeker for about a month and decided to go back into pursuing my own entrepreneurial ventures. I run a boutique recruiting firm, primarily for venture-backed startups and growth companies. I've been recruiting now for since 2013-ish. Um, and prior to that, I was in software product development and product management. And I have a mechanical engineering degree, so I have a bit of an eclectic kind of background. Never thought I'd become a recruiter. Anyway, somehow I found myself in recruiting. The reason I'm doing this, and I do this once a week for about 30 minutes each week, is as a moderator for the JSCs, I found that there's just a lot of um, either misconceptions or just lack of understanding of what recruiters do and how they do it. And I found that if I could share a little bit of insight, right information, right place, right time, with those that are navigating their job search, it would help them navigate that job search so much more effectively. And so that's why I do this. This is not meant to replace your JSC. I would rather prioritize questions that are related to sort of tapping my expertise and insight and perspective as a recruiter than covering the stuff that you would cover in your normal JSCs. So try to make the best use of this time. I encourage you guys to, drop some questions into the question board. Hey, John. And the question board link is in the chat box there. Feel free to use that code, drop a question, and we'll dive right in. I have a hard stop at 3:30 at the bottom of the hour, so we'll try to make a good use of the time here. Again, there's no sort of real structure to today's session. It's really just an AMA, ask me anything. So feel free to drop questions into that question board, upvote them, or um, drop them into the chat, and we can go from there. Okay, cool. All right. So first question I see in the question board, what are the key differentiators in a LinkedIn profile that result in a recruiter identifying you as a candidate? for one of their roles. So again, most of my responses to the questions here will be from my perspective as a recruiter. So when I look at as a recruiter, I'll usually be prompted to look at somebody's LinkedIn profile after looking at their resume. Oftentimes, I'll look at their LinkedIn profile even before I look at their resume in depth. What I look for in a LinkedIn profile is just more of a holistic view of the person, of kind of what they're putting out there into the world. Resumes tend to be more, how do you say, tailored for the job positions. And so I like looking at a resume as a recruiter to get a sort of, again, sort of a holistic picture of the person. What differentiates sort of a good versus a great LinkedIn profile? Most people can get to good, right? There's just a lot of guides out there, and talk about sort of using a whatever, a nice banner or a nice photo and this and that. And I would say that's sort of the 90%, right? That you follow any guide out there, you can get you to the 90%. As a recruiter, what I'm looking for, um, and so part of this depends on obviously the nature of the client and the requisition and the position that I'm searching for, I'm searching to fill. But what sticks out to me as a recruiter, um, is so one of the things I look for is just sort of career progression, right? Most of the clients that we've recruited for, they're looking for folks that are sort of high potential. So folks that are not necessarily specialists in their career, but folks that have tackled a bit of a variety in terms of the work that they've done, and they've achieved some level of progression. And so for me, as a recruiter, generally speaking, what I look for is title progression. And that's something that sticks out to me as someone that's sort of on that upward trajectory in terms of their career. I look at where they live, because that helps me understand sort of geographical proximity to the client. All things being equal, clients would rather have somebody that's in the same area, right? Um, I look for how they're sort of positioning themselves. So this goes to the candidate market fit statement in the never search alone sort of lingo. And when I look at somebody's LinkedIn profile, I like to understand what they're looking for and how they're positioning themselves. So if you can convey that candidate market fit statement in your LinkedIn headline, that's super helpful. Um, there is a trade-off, right? And I'd rather have somebody that's more focused in terms of what they're looking for as a recruiter than someone that's just sort of a jack of all trades, so to speak. Um, let's see, what else do I look for? I'll take a peek at any content that they've created. What are they writing about? What do they profess to be sort of versed in, or how are they trying to project themselves as a sort of an authority in their space? That's something that really differentiates people. I don't know what the percentage is, but most folks they're not establishing themselves as an authority through content. Most people are not. They don't take the time. Some people don't, they're just not into that. But if you can do that and you can write consistently about an area that you feel again, you don't have to, the word expert nowadays it's kind of tossed around very loosely. And especially with some of these technologies that are emerging so quickly. And if you find a niche in a specific emerging technology, for example, you can cast yourself as an expert fairly quickly. So the word experts gets tossed around quite a bit. But if you want to sort of project yourself as an expert, start writing content, even just documenting your learning journey around a certain topic that ideally aligns with sort of your experience and kind of what you're looking for in your candidate market fit. And so if you can do that in your content, and what I mean by content is like your LinkedIn posts, any blogs or articles that you have either associated or embedded on your LinkedIn profile, that's huge. Because again, most people don't do that. And when I look at somebody's LinkedIn profile, and if I see that they're generating content or they're writing as, sort of an authority figure around a certain topic, especially if that topic is related to the needed expertise for the job that I'm trying to fill, I'm more apt to get excited about that person, want to arrange a call with them. So yeah, as a suggestion, most people don't do that, but if you can start doing that, it'll get people's attention. Um, let's see. It's simple. A lot of people, and again, this is sort of going from 0 to 80%. Most people don't even fill out their LinkedIn profiles. So if you just start filling out your LinkedIn profile You'll get from 0 to 80 pretty quickly. Get it to 80 to 90, put some meaningful accomplishments, right? Get it from 90 to 95 to 99. Start quantifying those accomplishments in a meaningful way, right? Those things stick out. Okay. I think that's sort of the big things that come top of mind right now. Let's see. Lori, title progression stinks for me because I worked at a flat organization for 10 years. Then the pandemic happened. Yeah, so I'm just giving you kind of my perspective. And again, this is not for all clients or even in all cases from my perspective, right? But it is sort of it is a marker that I tend to look for, but it's not a hard line sort of thing for me. And I don't know that it's a hard line thing for a lot of folks either, but it is something that sticks out. Let's see. When you interview for startups, oftentimes they don't really know what they want in a role. How do you get them gently figured out as you're interviewing? Um, I guess what I'll say to this is that your experience is quite consistent with my experience. I've worked with a lot of startups, and oftentimes, they're making their first hire for a given role, whether it's their engineering manager or VP of engineering or their head of product or their first associate product manager, right? Whatever role they're interviewing for, they're trying to fill. A lot of times it's their first time hiring for that role. And so what I've seen is that they'll go through these cycles of, you know, um, interviewing folks and learning several things, learning what the market will bear for a given comp range or title, and they're learning what the team really needs, right? And sometimes that happens as a function of people going through the interview process and getting to the end even, and then all the decision makers looking at each other and being like, is this what we really need? So sometimes that happens where whether it's intentional or not, there's a lot of discussion that ends up happening and a lot of learning that ends up happening among the decision makers um, when they're trying to figure out, what they're looking for and how to evaluate what they're looking for, how to assess what they're looking for a new position, right? So I guess the question you have is, how do you help them gently figure it out as you're interviewing? And that's a great question. I've talked about this before many times, but if you can elevate yourself from being merely a candidate to being sort of a partner in their search, right? Um, you will demonstrate value beyond your typical candidate, right? How do you do that? Well, you act as sort of a consultant, right? You try to understand what problem they're trying to solve, and especially if you get the sense that this is their first time hiring for this position at the given company, you can even make some suggestions and give them some insight into what you know about the market, what you've seen. For example, if you're interviewing or talking with other companies for a similar or same role, you might have a good sense of um, what other employers are offering in terms of compensation, right, for a given role or given title. And so those are the kinds of information you could share with the recruiter or the team, as you progress through the process. Um, I'm trying to think what would be helpful for me as a recruiter as I'm trying to help a hiring team navigate this. Um, yeah, understanding what's out there in the market, even helping them talk through their needs, right? Because let's say, for example, you are interviewing for let's just say a senior product manager position. Let's say it's the first position at this company. Chances are they don't have a VP of product, like a dedicated VP of product that's hiring for this role. It might be, a founder that maybe has some product experience, but they've never operated in sort of a VP of product sort of capacity. And so and if you're a senior product manager, you may be able to provide insights into how to build and how to hire for a product management team. And so to the extent that you can get a sense of their challenges in hiring and understanding what their needs are and starting to make recommendations, um, I've found that hiring managers and myself as a recruiter in those situations, that those suggestions and insights were always welcome. And it always helped distinguish the candidates that were, again, sort of elevating themselves from just a candidate to sort of a partner in the search. So I hope that helps. Um, what do you think about someone taking on a new role that has a lower title but at a larger company? Will this impact future inbound recruiter outreach? So going back to this whole title thing before, right? Titles. So, and maybe I failed to mention this earlier. You know what? Again, I keep using product manager, but what a product manager, senior product manager might be at one company might be different from what that means at a different company. And a lot of that's correlated with the size of the organization, right? Which most of you are probably familiar with. Um, but what I look at, aside from, again, it's a shortcut. Title progression is a shortcut. But I also look at the companies that the person has worked for. And if they're household names, I probably have a sense of what that kind of environment is like. If they're not household names, they're probably smaller, maybe more obscure, or maybe they're just startups, right? And so I have a sense of what that title might mean in terms of their career within that organization. So, if someone is a VP of product, but it's a 10-person company, that might not mean as much as far as, sort of building a large team, building an organization, managing up to, a more executive kind of organization, navigating sort of politics and this and that. But, as far as taking a role at a lower title with a larger company, I would say that more astute recruiters would, be sensitive to that. So, for example, maybe the question has to do with, let's say you've worked 5 years for different companies and your titles have been product manager. Let's say senior product manager or even director level product manager, and now you're working at a larger organization, and maybe you're back to product manager, right? Um, Again, for the person that's reading your resume more closely, I don't think that's going to have an impact as long as the scope of your role is really sort of commensurate with the progression of your career, right? It wouldn't be looked at as a step back. Again, the whole title progression thing, it has to be taken within the context of what kind of environment you're working in, right? Because titles are titles, they're a shortcut, but they're also, they mean different things in different situations, different companies, different environments. So, will this impact the future inbound recruiter outreach? Uh, I, I, it could. Why don't I put it that way? It could, right? For somebody that's just scanning titles, it could. But if someone is looking a little bit more closely and they look at kind of the companies or the environments that you're working with, they might not necessarily peg it as, oh, this person is taking a step back. The thing too right now, and maybe the context in which you're asking this question, is that right now, it's tough to find a job out there, particularly in tech, right? And so you might have to take like a legitimate step back in terms of title and scope, right? And so most people know that that's going on right now. So if you have the opportunity to, and especially if you're either, if you've been out of work for some time and you're at a point where you need to get something, um, I wouldn't worry too much about the title. That's just my own perspective. Like, take the job, do what you need to do. If you can, try to negotiate for a different title, based on your experience. But if it's not available to, it's not available right now. I've heard a lot of folks that are taking sort of that step back in terms of title just to secure a position. And so I don't think there's any shame in that. Um, and I think, going forward in terms of, as the market evolves, as sort of the cycles swing back, I don't think that'll be held against you. What is the best way to describe you are consulting for multiple clients and are looking to pursue just one full-time employment, both on LinkedIn and Resume? What is the best way to describe how you are consulting? Who is the person here that put this down? Could they elaborate on this?
I work as a consultant right now for a few different clients, but I really want to just simplify my life and just pursue full-time employment as a
Mhm.
product manager. So how would I describe that and iterate both on LinkedIn and resume as well as to recruiters?
So you're working on multiple clients right now, sort of in like in a fractional capacity. and you're looking for a full-time position.
Yes.
Okay, okay. Um, are you finding that maybe people that you end up talking to are sort of questioning this transition, or is it more of a question of like how do you just convey that on your LinkedIn profile in an effective way?
Um, I think it's more around how do I iterate that, even though it's like I've been kind of consulting on the back end for like 7 years. I don't feel confident that, 7 years
The issue of those job postings.
will be different from full time as a product person.
So if I'm understanding your sorry, Stephanie, if I'm understanding your question here, it sounds like you've been doing like fractional work for multiple clients over the past 7 years, and now you're looking to transition into a single full-time position. Yeah, it's interesting, because I'm seeing it more the other way around right now. I'm seeing a lot of folks that are looking for full-time positions, and they're struggling to because of the way the environment is right now, and so they're more apt to go the other way. They're more apt to take on fractional work,
The
with
issue of
fractional
those jobs
clients.
postings that are not.
Sorry, is this Alina?
Oh,
But, yeah,
sorry.
no worries. Yeah, so Stephanie, I've been seeing it go sort of the other way around, which is interesting. You doing, sort of fractional work or consulting work, and then going to full time is kind of interesting. Um, but in terms of, how would you sort of message that on your LinkedIn profile and resume? So for me as a recruiter, it's helpful for me to see when a position is like part time or it's like if it's in a contractor kind of capacity. Because otherwise, if you just enumerate all the different positions that you've been in, or there are different clients that you've worked with, almost, I mean, for the most part, when I'm looking at a resume or a LinkedIn profile, the assumption is that they're full-time positions, right? So if I see a bunch of full-time positions for 6 months, 9 months, 3 months, 12 months, 18 months, my initial assumption, right? And a lot of times I'll know better after I think about it. My assumption is that the person has been jumping around. So to the extent that you can just sort of annotate somehow that the position is a contract position or a fractional. A lot of people are using that word fractional now. It sounds cooler, I guess. Use the word fractional. That would help me as a recruiter. So then I don't have to second guess. And I can sort of eliminate that from my mind that, oh, this person's been jumping around for the past 7 years. Right. And so that would be helpful on both the resume and the LinkedIn profile.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Uh, what if a job application has a required fields such as GPA, year of graduation, things that typically don't matter in a typical job application? Do we need to be truthful if irrelevant? So, yeah, it sounds like a bit of a generic job application if you're including all that stuff. And maybe I suspect, I'm taking some guesses here, so feel free to chime in here, whoever wrote this. Um, it might be for more of an entry level position if they're talking about graduation and GPA. I'm not sure. I guess some thoughts. You should always be truthful. Just as an aside, we're doing some interviews right now, and it's funny because my partner, she was on an interview with a person, and she was on Zoom, and interviews are almost, I hate to use this word interrogations, but you're trying to get to the truth, right? And so sometimes interviewers will ask the same question twice, or the same question will be asked twice in different ways, maybe on an application, maybe in a Zoom call. And so she asked him when did he leave his last position? And so what she heard in the background was rustling papers as he was trying to figure out and get his story aligned. I think she suspects that he was looking at his resume to figure out when he last left. He came back and said after a few seconds and rustling of papers, "Oh, I left last June, right, a few months ago." And so long story short, tell the truth. Tell the truth because the astute recruiters, astute interviewers, they'll eventually get to the truth, and and if they feel that you're not being genuine with them, it's going to be a black mark. So and it's just too much to like try to remember what your truth is if it's all made up. So yeah, I would suggest telling the truth. Um, I don't know, again, the GPA and graduation date, if they're asking for that, if it's a required field, especially if it's more of an entry level position and it's required, I mean, you have no other option than to put it down. Does it give you a competitive advantage? Maybe if you have a strong GPA. I think anything higher than 3.5 of a GPA is strong. Again, depending on what school you went to, but um, yeah. So for what that's worth, um, let's see, where am I? Uh,
Eric,
yeah.
kind of related to that. I think Workday just by default asks you graduation dates for
Oh,
every,
does it?
yeah.
Okay. Is it a required field?
Yes. If you're
Oh, it
going to
is.
add that education.
Oh, interesting. So for each education piece, it's going to ask you for graduation date and
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
I don't know if it always asks for GPA, but it definitely requires graduation dates because
Okay.
I always, uh, because of that, I usually will put my last degree and not my undergraduate, so then I don't have to show how old I am.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the input there. You know, ageism exists. So if you don't have to put graduation date, or there's a way not to, and that's a concern, I would, yeah, I would, you know, either just not put it down or whatnot. Um, let's see. What is the best way to describe? Okay, we covered that. Covered that. Can you speak to the issue of ghost jobs? Postings are not actively hiring for role. How can they be recognized? So yeah, this is a hot topic. This exists. This totally exists. And they might not, yeah, maybe the key word there is actively. I would, it's probably few and far between where it's completely disingenuous and they're posting a job where they have absolutely zero intention of hiring for either now or in the future. Those are probably less likely. I think what's more likely is that a company is just slowing their roll as far as hiring. Yet they're still posting jobs, and they do that for several reasons, right? They'll do that to sort of maintain sort of a funnel for talent. They'll do that. Well, I'm speculating here, but I would imagine that maybe some of these recruiters are doing it to justify their positions. Um, so they exist. And how can you recognize as an applicant whether a position is legitimate or not? Um, I mean, I would try to, when you're talking to a recruiter, I would try to get a sense of, and these are sort of meta questions that I've suggested in the past. Most people are talking about the job. What does the job entail? What are they looking for? Blah, blah, blah. If you can elevate, and that's what most candidates would ask. But if you start out trying to elevate yourself above being just a candidate and being a problem solver, you can start to ask questions of the recruiter about their pipeline, about how many recs, you know, they might be working on, how long the recs have been out there, how close are they to filling each of these recs? And if you frame those questions from the perspective of you trying to help the recruiter, at least for me, that would be welcome. And how can you help a recruiter? Well, obviously, if you're a candidate, you're in transition, you're looking for your next position, especially if you're, uh, a strong, again, I'm just using product manager. Let's say if you're a strong product manager, chances are you know other strong product managers in your network, right? And so those are things that you can bring to bear that could be valuable to the recruiter, right? You bring insights into trends, you bring a network that you could probably tap, even beyond, product management, right? And so to the extent that you can partner with the recruiter or the interviewer in terms of helping them solve their problem, you leave a mark, you leave a better impression. So that's been my experience, right? And it's few and far between when people do that. And that it almost can give you some license to ask some of these questions of, well, how long has the position been open? When are you looking to fill it by? How, what kind of, what are your headwinds, and what are the headwinds you guys are facing, you're facing in terms of filling this position, right? It almost gives you some license to ask those questions if you can start to position yourself as somebody that can help in that vein. But to recognize whether a position is a ghost position, you can probably ask them just when are they looking to fill this position? How long have they been at it? And where are people missing the mark? That'll give you a good sense, regardless of whether you think it's a ghost position or not, in terms of how serious they are about filling the position. The position's been open for 6 months and there's no sort of extenuating circumstances because chances are they're getting a lot of inbound, right? Where are they missing the mark, right? Maybe their expectations for the role are completely incongruent with what the market will sustain at a given rate, at a given budget, right? So you can start to ask those questions. Yeah. So I hope that helps. All right. I have time for maybe one or two more, and I gotta run. I'm applying to a role that is very similar to a role I had 2 years ago. What's the best way to showcase this on my resume? At a quick glance, my most recent job experience isn't relevant for the role I'm applying to. What's the best way to showcase this on your resume? I mean, if the role was only 2 years ago, I as a recruiter would probably be aware of that, right? When I'm looking at a resume, I'm not just looking at your current position. I'm looking, at least the past 5 years. For somebody that's more mid to senior, that has 10, 15 years experience, I'll look back 10 years and kind of get a feel for the sort of the direction, the patterns, the trajectory of the person, right? So 2 years is not that long ago. But if there, yeah, so I mean, for the position, even your current, again, assuming that this was in a complete pivot 2 years ago into what you're doing now, I would assume that there's some overlap in what you're doing now and what the new role would require. So if you can sort of try to mine out your experience in your current role that aligns with the new role or the role you're applying for, that feels like that's sort of the direction I would take if I were you. Okay. Can you give me some insight on these recruiting companies that find your resume online and are a little aggressive and seem to have a quota to reach? Ask you for your date of birth and something. That's sort of a red flag right there. Nobody needs your social security number. There might be some instances where they want to do a credit check on you, but more often than not, that'll be happening later, right? In some cases, companies, for example, if you work in something that's related to finance or something, where they'll want a credit check on you because they want to make sure that you're responsible from a credit perspective. They might ask you to, do a credit check or some sort of background check in that sense. But just to email you and say, hey, send me your social security number and your date of birth, it just reeks of scam to me. So,
Eric, that
yeah.
that was my question. I actually meant they'll ask you for your last four. Sometimes it's just your date of birth. But I've just had a lot of these recruiters reaching out, and the jobs for the most part seem to be pretty legit. But I've just been hit with a lot of them that lately, and they're always a little bit on the aggressive side. And
Yeah.
are they? How do you know if they're a scammer or not?
I mean, if that's the first thing that they're asking for and they feel pretty aggressive, it reeks of scam to me. Just know that there's a lot of scams out there. There's a lot of scams out there, and you just have to be kind of wise to them. A recruiter's not going to ask you for your date of birth or last four, your social on their first outreach, right? It's just,
So it's not usually on your first outreach. It'll be, are you interested in this job? Let's have a quick phone call. You talk about your experience, you ask some questions. They get you to sign a right to represent, and then you've decided on a rate. And these is typically for contract positions. that this happens a lot. And then they'll say, I'm just going to need your month and year of your birthday for to submit the profile because it's typically a unique identifier.
Yeah. I don't know. I would do some homework on who the recruiter is. Do they have a reputable, like, was their LinkedIn profile created last week? If they, you know, do they have like 5 followers or 5 connections? Um, yeah, I would just do a little bit of homework in that sense. But, you know, I don't know. You could even ask them, like, why do you need this information? And if
Yeah,
it
it's
doesn't,
because I mean it's happened multiple times and
yeah,
from a lot of different companies. And I just obviously I guess you're lucky enough you haven't been contacted by one, but I know a lot of
yeah.
people have, and it was brought up on the Never Such Alone website today too, about this. And I actually have an interview with a very legit company that we all know and love, and they're here in town and everything's lining up. And I went through this process with them. They've, nobody's asking me for money. This one didn't ask me for the last four of my social. They did ask me for my month and day of my birthday. But
Do they explain why?
yeah, it's a unique, so it sounds like there's this system somewhere like that their clients can go to, and it's a unique identifier on because what once one agency submits you, another agency can't.
Okay, I mean that's legitimate. There is a competition between, it's called claim, right? And so
Mhm.
being able to manage claim is something that's a legitimate concept. Um, I don't know. Usually email address is adequate as an identifier, as a unique identifier. So if you don't feel comfortable with it, make it up. That's just, I don't know.
Well, I
Yeah, I
guess.
mean, and if it's a requirement and you're not comfortable with it, you're not convinced, I mean, you got to trust your gut too. Um, but it sounds like you feel like it's legitimate. They're not asking for the date or the year,
Yeah.
so maybe you could feel more comfortable about that. But just be aware that there's a lot of scammers out there. Um, I got scammed the other day. I'll tell that story next week. But anyway, I have to run, you guys. I apologize. But thank you guys for showing up and being engaged. I appreciate your time and your engagement. And I will hope to see you guys next week. Have a great week. Talk to you soon.